As I sat in the conference room, my heart raced with anticipation. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, and the polished conference table reflected my image back at me. An image of a determined project manager ready to unveil the culmination of weeks of hard work. I had poured my soul into this project, crafting every detail, every slide, and every argument with care. When the time finally came, I stood up, my palms slightly sweaty as I clicked through my meticulously prepared presentation. The room was filled with the familiar faces of my team, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I began with the background of my project, highlighting the market research I had conducted. I felt a surge of pride as I explained the innovative strategies I had developed. My ideas danced in the air like vibrant colors, and I could see heads nodding in agreement. I had always believed that creativity thrived in collaboration, and today, my ideas were finally getting the spotlight they deserved. But then there was Clarissa. Sitting across from me, she wore a smirk that sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't quite place why her expression unsettled me, but something about it felt off. As the bosses began praising my work, I caught her eye again. Instead of the usual supportive nod, her gaze was laced with something else. This was not the first time I had sensed an undercurrent of competition between us. It was as if she was savoring the moment, relishing the attention that was rightfully mine. I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the feedback from my superiors. They were impressed, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Yet, as the meeting drew to a close and applause filled the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked beneath the surface. Clarissa's smirk lingered in my mind, igniting a spark of suspicion that I couldn't ignore. After the meeting, I found myself seeking refuge in the small cafe across the street, my usual haunt for a post-work coffee. The aroma of freshly brewed espresso wafted through the air, a comforting embrace amidst my swirling thoughts. I picked up my phone and texted Sarah, my best friend and confidant. I poured my heart out to her, detailing my unease about Clarissa and the strange feeling that she had been watching me too closely. Sarah's response was swift, her words a balm for my frayed nerves. She urged me to document my ideas comprehensively, to create a paper trail that would protect my intellectual property. It was a practical suggestion, but it also ignited an inner fire within me. I wasn't just going to let this slide. I had worked too hard to allow anyone to steal my thunder. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in my work, documenting every idea and every conversation I had about my project. I meticulously cataloged my thoughts, wanting to ensure that there was no ambiguity about the origins of my concepts. Yet every time I walked into the office, a knot formed in my stomach. I could feel Clarissa's presence like a shadow, lurking just behind me. It wasn't long before I began to notice the subtle shifts in our team meetings. Clarissa would present similar ideas during brainstorming sessions, her voice confident as she shared her insights. I clenched my fists under the table, frustration bubbling to the surface as I watched colleagues nod in approval, completely unaware of the theft occurring right before their eyes. Each time she passed off my concepts as her own, I felt as if I were being robbed, not just of my ideas, but of the recognition and respect I had fought so hard to earn. As I sat in those meetings, my mind raced with thoughts of confrontation, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I misinterpreted her actions? Would calling her out only make me look like the jealous coworker? The moral dilemma weighed heavily on me. I knew I needed to act, but with each passing day, the conflict within me grew more intense. I had to find a way to protect my work and reclaim my voice without succumbing to the darkness of revenge. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above me as I prepared to confront Clarissa. I had been pacing in my office, the walls feeling like they were closing in as my mind raced with the implications of what I was about to do. The air was thick with tension, amplified by the weight of betrayal I had felt over the last few weeks. Clarissa had taken my ideas, my hard work, and twisted them into her own, presenting them in meetings with an air of confidence that made my stomach churn. It was infuriating, but what terrified me more was the prospect of actually calling her out on it. What if she turned the tables on me? What if this confrontation backfired, and I found myself the target of ridicule instead? With a deep breath, I steeled myself. I resolved to keep a closer watch on her submissions, knowing that I had to gather more evidence before making any rash moves. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I needed a plan, a way to ensure that I would reclaim my ideas without losing my credibility in the process. The stakes were high, and I had worked too hard to let Clarissa undermine my career so easily. The following days passed in a blur of meetings and brainstorming sessions. I observed Clarissa with a keen eye, noting every instance she stole my ideas. The way she casually tossed out concepts that had been birthed in the solitude of my mind made my blood boil. In one session, she presented a proposal that mirrored my own work so closely that I could hardly contain my rage. My fingers curled into fists under the table as I struggled to maintain my composure. I felt a burning urge to shout out, to expose her right then and there, but the fear of repercussions silenced me. The room buzzed with enthusiasm for her brilliant ideas, oblivious to the fact that they were nothing more than a reflection of my own labor. As I sat there, my heart thundering in my chest, I was reminded of all the sacrifices I had made to climb the corporate ladder. Late nights, skipped lunches, weekends spent perfecting my projects. Each moment weighed heavily on my conscience. I had pushed myself to the brink, all for the sake of my ambitions. And now here was Clarissa, gliding through the office on the coattails of my hard work. The injustice of it all gnawed at me, igniting a fire of determination within me. I knew I had to take action, but the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. I began to think strategically, looking for allies in the office. I needed someone who understood the dynamics of our team, someone who could corroborate my observations without casting doubt on my intentions. As I navigated this complex web of office politics, I felt the weight of my situation bearing down on me. It was exhausting, constantly second-guessing my every move while trying to remain professional. I found myself longing for the straightforward days when my biggest concern was simply meeting deadlines. As I continued to gather my thoughts, I realized that my predicament was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice in an environment that had become hostile to my creativity. I had always been passionate about my work, pouring my heart and soul into every project. The thought of losing that passion to someone who had no qualms about stealing it felt like a betrayal not only to myself but to the very essence of who I was as a project manager. Each day, I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. My resolve to confront Clarissa grew stronger as I meticulously plotted my next move. I envisioned scenarios where I could expose her duplicity without risking my standing. I imagined presenting a project that highlighted the similarities between her work and mine, a way to shine a light on the truth without directly attacking her. The thought of finally having my day in the sun filled me with a mix of dread and excitement. As I prepared for the upcoming brainstorming sessions, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. No longer would I be a passive observer in my own story. I would take control, reclaim my narrative, and ensure that my ideas were recognized for what they truly were. My creations born from my dedication and hard work. My heart raced at the thought, and I could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of vindication. The time for action was drawing near, and I was ready to face whatever came next. As I sat across from Mike in the dimly lit break room, the air thick with the aroma of burnt coffee, I felt an odd mix of relief and trepidation. This was the first time I was confiding in someone who not only understood the depths of my frustrations, but had also witnessed the injustices happening right under our noses. Mike, with his calm demeanor and analytical mind, had always been the supportive coworker, but I never imagined he would be the one to help me navigate this treacherous path. I recounted the countless instances when I'd seen Clarissa twist my ideas into her own, presenting them with an air of authority that felt like a dagger to my heart. Each stolen thought, each pilfered innovation felt like a piece of my identity being stripped away. As I spoke, I could see the gears turning in Mike's mind, his brow furrowing slightly as he pieced together the timeline of events I had laid out. Together, we began brainstorming strategies to expose Clarissa without tarnishing my reputation. I was well aware that my next move was crucial. Any misstep could not only backfire on me but could also solidify Clarissa's facade of success. Mike suggested we create a fake project, one that exaggerated the scope of Clarissa's appropriated ideas. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. This was a bold and risky maneuver. However, the more we discussed it, the more it began to feel like the only viable option. We spent the next few days meticulously crafting our plan. The fake project was to be a parody of sorts, an exaggerated version of what Clarissa had been presenting. I remember the late nights we spent in the office, surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups, as we meticulously pieced together the components of our presentation. I combed through my old notes, the ones where I had painstakingly documented my ideas before they had been usurped. Each bullet point brought back a flood of memories, long hours, sleepless nights, and an unwavering commitment to innovation. The more we worked, the more my anxiety churned in my stomach like a turbulent sea. I was aware that this plan could be seen as vindictive, and the idea of being perceived that way gnawed at me. What if the backlash fell not on Clarissa but on me? What if I was the one who ended up looking petty? Yet, with every moment that passed, I felt the weight of my integrity pushing me forward. This was about more than just revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice and my ideas. As the presentation day approached, I found myself caught in a web of conflicting emotions. There was excitement at the thought of finally confronting the betrayal head-on, but it was intertwined with a dread I couldn't shake. I spent sleepless nights rehearsing my part of the presentation, imagining the expressions on my colleagues' faces as I unveiled the absurdity of the project we had engineered. Each scenario played out in my mind, leaving me breathless with anticipation or fear. On the morning of the presentation, I awoke with a knot in my stomach. I could barely eat breakfast as I ran through every detail of our plan. The office buzzed with activity, and as I made my way to the conference room, I felt the weight of every step. There was a strange dichotomy within me. Part of me wanted to turn back, to walk away from this confrontation, while another part burned with the need to see justice served. As I stood outside the conference room, I could hear the muffled chatter of my colleagues inside, their voices a blend of excitement and curiosity. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the countless hours I had dedicated to my work, the sacrifices I had made to get to this point. I was ready to stand up for not just myself but for every person who had ever felt their creativity stifled by someone else's greed. I felt a sense of purpose swelling within me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. As I sat in the conference room, the tension in the air was palpable. My heart raced in anticipation of what was about to unfold. Today was the day I would finally confront the injustice I had endured for far too long. The sterile walls of the room felt like they were closing in on me, amplifying every sound, the rustle of papers, the faint clicking of pens, the hushed whispers of my colleagues. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their curiosity about the outcome of this meeting. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the importance of standing up for my work, my ideas, and my integrity. Mike sat beside me, offering a reassuring nod. His presence was a comfort amidst the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. I couldn't help but admire the way he had been my ally throughout this ordeal, always encouraging me to stay strong, to stay focused. I remembered our late-night brainstorming sessions, the way we meticulously crafted our plan to expose Clarissa. As the minutes ticked by, I clenched my hands together, feeling the rough edges of my anxiety. I was ready to reclaim my narrative. Clarissa strode into the room with an air of confidence that was almost infuriating. She had no idea what was coming. As she began her presentation, the familiar cadence of her voice struck a chord deep within me. I had heard her pitch similar ideas before, ideas that were, in fact, mine. I fought against the rush of anger that threatened to bubble to the surface. I needed to remain composed. I needed to let her dig her own grave without interruption. The room filled with applause as she concluded her presentation, her face glowing with the kind of pride that only comes from deception. The compliments flowed around me like a tidal wave, but I felt like an outsider watching a performance I had not been invited to. When it was finally my turn, I stood up, my legs shaking slightly beneath me. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. This was it, the moment I had been building toward. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I approached the podium. The air felt electric, charged with the anticipation of what I was about to reveal. I could almost hear my heart drumming in my ears, drowning out the noise of the room. I glanced at Mike and he offered a reassuring smile, his confidence bolstering my resolve. As I began my presentation, I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. The audience leaned in, intrigued by the seriousness of my tone. I laid out the details of the fake project we had created, carefully weaving in the elements that mirrored Clarissa's appropriated ideas. I presented with clarity, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded with the knowledge of what was at stake. I felt exhilarated, empowered, as I unveiled the absurdity of Clarissa's actions. My colleagues listened intently, the initial curiosity morphing into disbelief as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. With every slide I revealed, I could see the realization dawn on their faces. Gasps filled the room, whispers of shock flitting through the air as they began to connect the dots. I could hardly breathe, the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I felt the tide turning. I was no longer the victim but the bearer of truth, wielding my narrative with precision. Clarissa's confident demeanor began to falter, and I relished the sight, knowing that her facade was crumbling, and I was the one who had orchestrated this moment. As I approached the climax of my presentation, the room was thick with tension. I could feel the collective breath of my colleagues, hanging in the air as they awaited the conclusion. The power of vulnerability filled me. I was not just sharing a story, I was reclaiming my voice. I could almost taste the satisfaction of unveiling the truth, the sweet victory that came from standing up for myself and my ideas. But as the moment drew closer, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I crossing a line? Would they see me as vindictive or justified? The internal struggle was brief, overshadowed by the urgency of my mission. In that moment, I resolved to push through the uncertainty. I had fought too hard for my ideas to let fear dictate my actions now. I would not be silenced any longer. I was ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead, convinced that the truth was worth the risk. As I stood before the room filled with my colleagues, the air crackled with tension. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through my veins. I had meticulously crafted this moment, and now it was here, the culmination of all my frustration and resolve. With a deep breath, I began to unveil the absurdity of the project I had created with Mike. Each slide flickered to life, showcasing the ludicrous similarities between Clarissa's so-called innovative ideas and the mock project we had constructed. The gasps that erupted from the audience were like a symphony of disbelief. I could see their faces shifting from confusion to realization, the gears in their minds clicking into place as they connected the dots. I pointed out specific elements, highlighting the uncanny resemblance to my original concepts, which had been pilfered and repackaged as Clarissa's own. My voice, steady and resonant, filled the room, weaving a narrative that was both damning and illuminating. As I advanced through the slides, I noticed Clarissa's face drain of color. The confident facade she wore so well began to crack, revealing the panic that was slowly creeping in. I laid out the timeline of events, each meeting where I had shared my ideas, each instance she had presented them as her own. I could feel the shift in the room, the murmurs beginning to swell as colleagues exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from admiration for Clarissa to disbelief and judgment. It was exhilarating yet terrifying to witness. I had always been the quiet one, the one who preferred to blend into the background, but now I was at the forefront, exposing a betrayal that had festered in the shadows. My heart raced not just from the fear of backlash, but from the power of reclaiming my narrative. The audience's eyes were wide, drinking in the evidence I was presenting. Their reactions fueled my confidence, each nod and furrowed brow pushing me forward. I could see Clarissa's composure begin to falter, her rehearsed charm slipping through her fingers like sand. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to regain control but failing miserably. As I detailed the specifics of her duplicity, I could almost hear the gears of her mind whirring as she scrambled to formulate a defense. Yet, the truth was far too evident, and the weight of her deceit hung heavily in the air. The murmurs intensified, a cacophony of disbelief and betrayal. Colleagues I once considered friends were now grappling with the reality of what had transpired. I felt a surge of vindication. Every sleepless night spent worrying about my ideas being stolen, every moment of doubt I had experienced, was now justified. I had taken back my power and it was intoxicating. As the presentation drew to a close, I stood tall, my heart calm yet racing, knowing I had done what needed to be done. I had exposed the truth and there was no going back. Clarissa's reputation, built on manipulation and deceit, was crumbling before my eyes. The executives were whispering among themselves, their expressions shifting from surprise to disdain as they absorbed the evidence laid out before them. I felt a fierce pride swell within me, a testament to my resilience and integrity. In that moment, I understood that this confrontation was not just about revenge, It was about justice. It was about standing up for myself and my work, about reclaiming my voice in a space that had felt increasingly hostile. I had navigated the treacherous waters of betrayal, and here I was standing strong, ready to face whatever came next. The anticipation of the executive's reaction hung in the air, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Whatever happened now, I knew I had taken a stand for what was right, and that realization was more empowering than I could have ever imagined. The atmosphere in the conference room was thick with tension, as the executives gathered to address the fallout from my presentation. I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through me, a mix of triumph and disbelief at what had unfolded just moments before. Clarissa sat at the end of the long mahogany table, her face flushed and eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. I had watched her charm and manipulate her way through meetings, but now, stripped of her usual confidence, she looked vulnerable. It was a sight I never thought I would witness, and it stirred a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity within me. As the executives began to speak, I could see the wheels turning in their minds. They had been presented with a clear timeline of events, each example meticulously documented, the evidence irrefutable. Clarissa attempted to defend herself, her words tumbling out in disjointed bursts. She spoke of inspiration, of collaboration, but the more she spoke, the more her words fell flat. They were mere echoes of her previous deceit, and I could sense the room's collective judgment forming. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of calm washing over me. This was not just about exposing her. It was about restoring my own voice after months of feeling silenced. After what felt like an eternity, the executives deliberated and reached their conclusion. Clarissa was to be put on probation. I watched as she sank back into her chair, the glimmer of hope fading from her eyes. But even that was not enough for me. I could see the writing on the wall, and I knew in my heart that it wouldn't be long before she was let go entirely. The thought ignited a spark of vindication within me, a feeling I had longed for since the first moment I suspected her betrayal. The days that followed were a whirlwind of accolades and recognition for my integrity and innovation. My colleagues approached me one by one, expressing their support and admiration. For the first time, I felt truly seen. The promotion I had been offered felt like more than just a title. It was a validation of my hard work and a recognition of the creativity I had poured into my projects. I stood at the precipice of a new chapter in my career, one that would not only allow me to thrive, but also empower me to uplift others who had felt marginalized or overlooked. As I prepared to address my colleagues in a follow-up meeting, I reflected on my journey. I had entered this corporate world with dreams of making my mark, but along the way, I had been met with challenges that tested my resolve. Clarissa's betrayal had been a painful chapter, yet it had also served as a catalyst for my transformation. I realized that standing up for my ideas was not merely an act of revenge. It was an assertion of my worth and a reclaiming of my voice. When I stood before my colleagues, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I spoke not just about my success but also about the importance of protecting creativity and integrity in the workplace. I wanted to inspire others to speak out against injustice, to never shy away from confronting wrongdoing, and to always advocate for their own ideas. I encouraged them to document their work, to share their innovations, and to support one another in a culture that often prioritized conformity over creativity. As I wrapped up my speech, a wave of applause erupted around me, but it was not just for my achievements. It was a collective acknowledgement of the journey we all shared. I looked around the room and saw a glimmer of hope in my colleagues' eyes. I had become more than just a project manager. I had become a catalyst for change. In that moment, I vowed to lead by example, to inspire others to stand tall and protect their voices. The experience had transformed me, and I promised myself that I would never again allow anyone to silence my creativity or my integrity.